Hey, you guys, welcome back to Speak Out with Christine Yeargin. I am your host, Christine Yeargin, and today's episode is one I am so excited to share with you. I am truly inspired by today's guest. I have been watching her content on YouTube is where I first found her, and now she has a podcast called Classically Abby that you should all check out. But she speaks on being classic, like classic living and traditional values and modern femininity and what that looks like, how it is kind of the counterculture to what we're experiencing today. You know, people say that you don't have to be traditional and motherhood is evil and climb the corporate ladder, all of these things that kind of negates our real true purpose, which is crazy. That's even a controversial statement that, you know, getting married and becoming a mother is, you know, kind of what women are supposed to do and what women want to do even. And we talk about that in today's episode. Abby Roth is the guest. If you didn't already know who she was, from knowing her from Classically Abby, she's got a big fan base and has been making content for quite some time. So some of you may know who she is, but I'm really excited to have her on to dive into this. She also shares a unique perspective. She's been a pro-lifer for a very long time and has become even more pro-life recently because of a miscarriage that she very unfortunately had, and can talk about how that made her more pro-life and how that has affected her and what she sees, the other side pushing, kind of like, it's not a baby, you have nothing to mourn type of thing. And we touch on that. But she shares a unique perspective and she has a lot of great content. So I want you guys to go follow her, find her podcast. What am I talking about? Find her podcast, Classically Abby. You're going to love it. I absolutely adore her. She's one of my new favorite followers. I've been following her for several months now, and I love it. I am being influenced by her. Her little influencing is working on me because I find myself wanting to become more maternal, even more nurturing, and tap into those things that are already there inside of us. So let's get into today's episode. You guys are going to love it. Abby, thank you so much for joining us. It is an absolute pleasure to have you. I want to kind of start out because I know who you are, and I think a lot of people know who you are, but you actually have your own content creation space. So I want to hear a little bit how you got started in that, because it's a weird thing, when you're a content creator, people are sometimes like, you just start sharing your life on YouTube. Like, tell us a little bit how you got started in that realm of things.
Yeah. So I actually was an opera singer. I studied opera at the Manhattan School of Music, and I did undergrad at University of Southern California. And when I met my husband while I was doing my professional studies certificate, it was like technically the height of my career, right? I was in Aspen. I was at the Aspen Music Festival. I was performing a main role, and I had just met my husband. And then we had to separate for 10 weeks while I was traveling to do this role. And I should have been like on top of the world, so excited, doing this incredible thing. And all I could think was, I just met the man I'm going to marry, and now I'm separated from him for 10 weeks. And so I knew that this opera thing probably wasn't going to be conducive to the lifestyle I really wanted, which is, being with my children and being around my husband and being part of a Jewish community. And so I had to start thinking, okay, what do I want to do and what is my mission? And what became very clear to me was I wanted to talk and share my experience having been a conservative in a really leftist space, in the art space. And then that sort of morphed into how to be a classic woman and how to take that on in this era that we live in now. So I started making YouTube videos. I started my blog, Classically Abby, and then it really kind of moved from there into what I'm doing now, which is my podcast. And I still have a YouTube channel and Instagram and all of that. But I really want to focus on classic living, traditional values, and modern femininity, because I think it is so hard for us as women to embrace our womanhood when we live in an era of, being a woman is either terrible or you have to be a girl boss. There's no in between.
Absolutely. No, I agree. And it's very frustrating because I feel like there's nothing more empowering than being feminine and being a woman. But you bring up the fact that you want to share classic living and obviously traditional values. What does classic living mean to you?
So what I always say is that classic living is an outgrowth of traditional values. If you live with traditional values, if you respect that, the way that we've kind of embraced marriage, having children, growing societies with, good values, if you believe in that, then you are going to be living classically because you're going to be doing those things in your everyday life. And one of the other things that I talk about with classic living is being the best version of yourself. It is so important as people to constantly be growing and not just doing the you do you thing, which I can't stand, but instead saying, I always want to be better. I consistently want to grow. On top of which, just really embracing that womanhood, being feminine is, to me, classic in every sense of the word.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when I talk to people about being traditional and you talk about modesty and stuff like that, people immediately go to Little House on the Prairie. And don't get me wrong, I would love to have a homestead. That's my dream. I want acreage. I want my kids running around on a farm one day. But people think that if you're talking about modesty or traditional values or getting married, that you have to be, like I said, Little House on the Prairie, but you don't. I mean, you live a very modern lifestyle. You're not out milking the cow necessarily and doing all of that, but you still embrace these traditional values and promote them to young women all over the world who watch you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that there's a misunderstanding of what traditional means. People think traditional means old-fashioned in a bad way, where it's like everything is, women are lower than men, which don't get me started on that whole narrative. But then that women are not strong, that women have to be chained to the home, that kind of thing. Whereas I'm saying, no, traditional values are understanding how the world works, why it works that way, and then implementing that into the real world so that societies and civilizations can thrive. The traditional values that getting married is a good thing, having children is a good thing, women being close to their children and, attaching with them, that being a positive thing. That's what I mean when I talk about traditional values. I mean, that's what we're saying is that it's not that you are going back to a past that's not good. It's understanding how the world works, because tradition is really just saying that these things that have worked for thousands of years, hundreds of years, whatever you want to say, are still working today. And we're just constantly trying to undermine it for reasons that go back to a lot of philosophy, generally go back to Marxism and communism, but that we are undermining things that work. And these things work for a good reason. And if you implement them into your lives, you'll find meaning, fulfillment, and purpose.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think that not only, I obviously am Christian and you're Jewish, but, I think our values are kind of similar and that they are classic and traditional. But I think they also, whether they're biblical or not, I think they also make so much logical sense, like getting married before having babies. So you're with a husband. And, I've said it before on this podcast, like God's design for marriage and family is intentional. And it's also so logical. I mean, it just makes sense. And it's like, you guys just use your brain. But we live in a world who doesn't want us to get married, who doesn't want us to have our babies. They want us to, climb the corporate ladder in order to achieve something, which is so crazy because, that's obviously hard to do. But they say that motherhood is hard. And I'm like, but trying to climb this corporate ladder is not hard. I mean, it's ridiculous. How would you say, because we do have a lot of young women who listen to this, how would you say you remain classic while dating in 2023?
Oh, absolutely. I love talking about dating and relationships. That's one of my favorite topics. And I do think that we live in an era and it's so hard to date because so much of it is online. So much of it is, honestly, if you think about it like this, we used to live in little communities and going out to meet people wasn't really a thing. So you had your certain circle of people that you grew up with, that you knew, and that you were probably going to end up with one of them. You're probably going to marry one of them. Now, literally the world is your oyster. You can be talking to someone across the world, which is amazing that we have opened up these boundaries.
Or 20 someone.
Right. That you can see literally anybody, date literally anyone. But at the same time, it means that you have such a plethora of options that it's really overwhelming, not only for you, but for the men who are talking to you and maybe looking over your shoulder to see who else they can date.
Exactly.
So I think that what it really comes down to, and I've talked about the importance of these things, I actually did a speech on this, is first of all, not having sex before you're married. That is just so important. When you are dating, your there's so many reasons why not having sex before marriage is important. I mean, there's the basic ones, right? STDs, you don't want to get pregnant before you're married and you have support, all of that. But also from an emotional perspective, you are giving yourself a much worse chance of coming out of a relationship feeling like, okay, maybe this guy wasn't the right guy for me, but it's okay. You're now going to be putting yourself into a position of really mourning that relationship because you put yourself in a position of vulnerability with someone who you can't trust is going to be with you forever. And that, to me, is just so painful, right? Because sex is different than any other physical activity. Sex is something that there's a reason that there's assault and that there's sexual assault. There's a reason those are two different things, that they are held differently in people's views, because sex is so much more intimate, is so much more vulnerable, and it's not just any other physical thing. So sharing it with the one person who you want to build a family with, who you can trust, who knows that he wants to take care of you and wants to make you feel good. It's not just about him, it's for you too. That is so important. So that's one way that you can be classic in dating.
Yeah.
I could keep going on about it, but
No, I love that because, and I love having you here and that you love talking about that, because I'm just like looking at what's out there, and I'm married obviously and have a family, but I'm like, good luck, y'all. I mean, to me, I'm like, I don't know what mess is going on out there. I don't want any part in that. And I don't know what kind of advice to give you, but good luck. Something that we also see today, especially with young women, is this like boss babe culture where, they're like, everybody needs to be a boss babe, but you kind of speak out against that. And I want to touch on that just briefly because it's not necessarily helping women. It's kind of harming them.
Oh my gosh. Don't get me started on this concept. Okay. So here's where I'm going to start. Fulfill your potential. That phrase drives me up a wall because we have equated fulfilling your potential with reaching the ultimate heights of your career. Why? Mm-hmm. Why is that the case? Why isn't a mom who is at home with her kids, who's raising the next generation to be incredible members of society, fulfilling her potential? Why? Because it's not all about her. That's why, because it's about her and a shared goal with her husband and her children. She's doing something that's not just totally forward facing that everyone can point and say, look at what she did. It's sometimes less glamorous to be the mom at home who's doing something so important. And fulfilling your potential has nothing to do with your career. If you want to do something for your career that you really love and brings you meaning and fulfillment, you know what? More power to you, as long as you can prioritize, because I think that that's really what it comes down to, is prioritizing family and community and faith. That always needs to come first before your job. If you're putting your job ahead of that, you've got things mixed up. But if you have a job where those priorities can stay in place and you're finding meaning and purpose through it, great. But if you feel like, hey, I just want to be a mom, I just want to raise my kids and be with them, I'm all for it, because you know what? Though there's no other job where you are irreplaceable. When you are your child's mother, no one can do that job except you. Literally no one. Whatever job you are doing, it might be great and you might love it, but at the end of the day, you can be replaced. And that is different. That is something that I think we all need to keep in our minds. And I think so many women, something that I've had to talk to a lot of my friends about, feel so guilty for having invested time and money into a degree, then having children and thinking to themselves, I really like to be at home with my kids, but how can I do that? I spent all of this time and money on something. Shouldn't I keep staying with this job that I've really put this? That's the sunk cost fallacy. The idea that you put this money, you put this time in, and now you can't get out. You have to keep going. No, you don't. You don't have to keep going. And that's okay. If you decide that you spent that time and money on a degree that isn't something you want to keep going with, you want to stay at home with your kiddos, awesome. That time is never ill spent. That's going to be used in a way you might not know yet, but will eventually be really relevant to you. The fact that I am no longer a professional opera singer, but I did that for 7 years, it was really hard for me to accept, okay, well, I'm going to do something different and I want to stay home with my kids. But now look what I'm doing. I'm really comfortable talking to strangers. I'm really comfortable performing. And that is, something that is invaluable. So even if you don't end up doing an exact job that your degree was for, that is not time ill spent.
I think it's so important to debunk this narrative that moms, don't have a job, or they just stay at home, or they do nothing. I mean, it doesn't matter what I'm doing. If I'm at home and, in my sweats cuddling with my babies, I feel amazing. If I am out doing a public speaking thing, or even a news hit or something, if I'm traveling and I call my husband and we're talking and I hear the kids in the background, I want to be at home. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'm like, and I've been watching, in research, preparing for this episode, I've been watching a lot of your videos and listening to some of your podcast episodes. And I don't tell students for life this, and don't tell my bosses, but I'm like, dang, I kind of want to pull back, and I'll still do my podcast because this studio is in my home. And so I can do this from home, which is really nice. And, a quick 45-minute episode here and there. And then I do my research when they're sleeping. So I don't take a ton of time away from them for the actual podcast. Please don't fire me, guys. But it's something that I feel most fulfilled when I'm with my kids, and when I see them laughing, and when I see them learning, and when I'm experiencing the world through their eyes. And I tell friends who are pregnant or engaged or planning to have kids, I'm often like, I've told them, you don't know true unconditional love until you have a child. And so I've had people get offended, like, no, I love my husband. I'm like, I get it, but you don't know true unconditional love until you have a child. And then they have their baby and they're like, I get it. This gives me meaning and purpose. And no matter what this baby does or how long they cry at night, maybe, I still love them with every fiber of my being. And I think that if we can get back to that, I think we would have a different America today if we had people valuing families the way that we should be, in the way that God intended.
100%. No, I remember after my son was born, especially those first 3 months after you have a newborn, that baby is not giving you anything. Okay. So by 3 months, right, they're starting to smile at you, and then they're interacting, and then it's super fun. But those first 3 months, it's not like that. The baby you absolutely love those cuddles, but that baby is not really interacting with you. And I remember saying to my husband, I can feel my love being born of the responsibility I have to this person. It's not even, oh, I love being with you, because there's nothing you're not spending time with a newborn. The baby isn't interacting, but it's this responsibility to this child. The commitment that you have to this child creates a love in you that is so much stronger than anything you've ever felt. So I 100% agree with you on that. And I think I've been talking more about this idea of slow living. And as you were kind of talking about how you get so much meaning from spending time with your children, it was reminding me of, I think we kind of lose the thread when we are always goal oriented and thinking everything I do needs to be for blank, needs to be to get to this point, instead of my favorite part of the day is playing with my baby when I have no goals in mind. We are just spending time together. We are sometimes it's me literally just sitting there while he plays, and I'm not playing with him because he doesn't know how to play with me quite yet. So he's kind of playing by himself, and I'm in the room, and just being there with him is so meaningful, because that's the stuff life is made of. So I think that if Americans, I agree with you, if Americans were just more invested in their family life, in their home life, instead of in themselves, that would be a big improvement from where we're at now. Yeah.
How do you think it harms culture when we push women away from motherhood? I think, we talk about the importance of motherhood and how we should be valuing families, but in what ways does it harm women when we push them away from that?
Oh man, in so many ways. First of all, women themselves feel, anxiety and depression is skyrocketing for women because they don't know what they're for. We always knew what we were for before this idea of okay, I am here because I'm going to raise these incredible babies. Everybody, there's a book by Carl Trueman that everyone should read. And in that book, he talks about how it used to be that we were all defined by our connections to others. I'm a daughter, I'm a mother, I'm a community member, I'm a wife. And that was kind of how we found our identity. But now we live in an era where it's our identity has to come from inside our brains. It has to come from inside our bodies. I have to self-define. And there's a negative connotation to being known in relation to something else, because now it's not about you. You are someone's mother. That's all you are. You're just someone's mom. You're not just you based on your definition of yourself. I think this is where women get so hurt, is that they are trying to self-define and saying like, this is who I am because of my job, or this is who I am because of where I live, or this is who I am because of whatever else it is, instead of saying, oh, I know what I'm for. I know what I'm going to do with my life. I know what's important. And that is awesome. And that's not to say that, to be clear, this is not to say that before you have children, you have no purpose, or that if you're dealing with infertility, that means you have no purpose. I'm always talking about faith and community and family, not necessarily always meaning as a mother. You can be a really important member of your community, of your faith community. You can be a really important, aunt. You can do fostering. There's really important ways to be involved in the next generation that doesn't need to be directly mother to child, so you are not in that position. But women who are constantly being told and guided away from these really important life goals of marriage and motherhood are only hurting themselves, because first of all, they're putting themselves in a position of being lonely. They're making worse decisions. Yeah. Women, when you are lonely, you will make men and women will make worse decisions because they're just looking for companionship. And if we turn women away from marriage, then they're still going to date, but they're going to date in a negative sense. They're going to start dating for fun. They're going to start sleeping around. They're going to start being with guys who don't value them and who don't actually see a future with them. And so when we are saying these things are not important, we're putting women in a really terrible position of being more anxious and depressed and guided in a direction away from those things that do provide meaning and purpose.
Yeah. So would you say that every person, and specifically we're women, so we can relate to women a little bit more. Obviously, I think a lot of this applies to men as well. Would you say that every woman should get married and have babies?
So here's what I say to that. I say 99.9% of women would benefit from those things, want those things. And this is my issue with the narrative as it stands. There's this narrative that, okay, well, there's a chance that you'll want those things. Like a 50-50 shot that you'll want to have kids, but there's a really high chance that you won't. And so women think to themselves, oh, like maybe I won't want those things. Maybe I should invest more time into something less important than pursuing these things that are really, really important. The truth is that there is a teeny tiny percentage of women who would legitimately be happier not having children or not getting married. Very, very, very small percentage of women. It's not likely that's you. If you feel like you are trying this thing where you are doing the girl bossing and you're dating for fun and you are not really investing your time and energy into the things that matter, that I'm saying matter, those traditional values, but you're not getting anything out of it, it's probably because it's not meant for you. It's not meant for most women. Like most women are supposed to and should try to get married, try to have children, because those things, like I said, those traditional values have stood the test of time. There's a reason God built the world this way. And I try not to depend on like religious arguments, but I also believe in God. And I think that there is a religious, like God built the world to function in a certain way. And there's a reason that we benefit from getting married, from having partners, from having that support system. And there's a reason that women love being mothers. And so, I mean, like, let's talk about the fallacy of the wage gap for a second. The wage gap doesn't really exist. The truth is that women prefer to stay at home with their kids or choose jobs that are less high powered so that they can work part time. You know, there's a reason for that because women prefer it. They want it.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to mention, because even in the jobs that we choose, a lot of times, you know, like social work or teacher, I mean, those are still also kind of nurturing type jobs. They're a little bit maternal in nature. I want to touch a little bit on, because you've been married for several years, and I want to talk about marrying somebody who's like-minded and how important that is in your values to be aligned with them, whether you have a faith or not, whether especially pro-life beliefs, how important is it to be like-minded? Because I have a lot of young women who say, well, like, I think I could change him, or like, he's kind of in the middle on this, or, what would you say to young women? Do you say, ditch that guy that you think you can change and go find somebody else? Like, what do we do here when somebody is looking to date in 2023? And how important is it to find the like-minded person for them?
Yeah. So I always like to create a differentiate between changing someone who is totally different and has a totally different worldview than you have, and somebody who is on the path to your worldview, but is not quite there yet. So for example, my husband, when we met, he was not observant at all. He wasn't really religious, but he was very interested in becoming religious. And so our conversation was kind of like, okay, so is this important to you? Is this something you want to do? And he was the one, I wasn't pushing him. He was the one saying, yes, I want to do this. I'm going to spend time on this. This is really important to me. I want to learn more about it. Because he came from a Reform background. I was raised Orthodox. I was okay with that because I saw that he was on a path towards being in the same place that I was. That is very different than going on a date with a guy who's like, yeah, I'm pro-choice. I don't believe that women should be mothers. I am, anti-gun, whatever else it is. Guy being like, these are my standpoints, and you saying, I'm going to change him. That's not going to happen. Yeah. The truth is, it's not your job to make it happen. It is not your job to make a guy change his mind about these things. I always say that there's two parts to every great relationship. And you've heard this before, but I have a little bit of a different take. Chemistry and compatibility, right? You've always heard that you need both for it to be a really good relationship. Most women date their chemistry guy and their compatibility guy before they meet the chemistry and compatibility guy, meaning the right guy.
Right.
And the chemistry guy is the guy who most of the women who might be coming to you are talking about. We talk all night. We get along so well. I can't be away from him. Our personalities mesh so perfectly. Do we agree on literally anything? No. Does he want to have children? No. Does he want to get married? No. Does he believe in God? No. Like, all of these huge questions are left completely out to dry while that chemistry is so powerful. And that relationship is going to end in heartbreak because it feels like it can't end since your personalities must be so perfect for each other. But in truth, even starting that relationship in the first place was probably a bad idea because it's not going to, those compatibility issues are not going to resolve. Compatibility guy is, we are perfect on paper, but actually we have no chemistry. And that's the guy that you break up with and you don't feel anything like deep, but you're kind of like, maybe I should have ended up with that guy. Like, was he right?
Yeah.
The right guy is the guy who you can talk all night. You have the best time with each other, but you don't feel that anxiety that you're going to break up because the compatibility is there. And so many people confuse anxiety for passion. They confuse that fear of breaking up, that roller coaster of like, we're on again, off again because that compatibility doesn't work out. They confuse that feeling with like, oh my gosh, I can't lose him. I can't lose him. You only feel like you can't lose somebody because you know that you will. When you're with the right guy, you don't feel that.
That's such a good point because I feel like, I've dated obviously before I met my husband, and I actually dated as a single mom. I had an unplanned pregnancy, and this is why I'm so passionate about the pro-life movement. But I've kind of experienced everything that you've just said. The guy who's like perfect on paper, the same values, and actually was a single dad, and thought that things were going to work out there, and it was just not. It just was not going to work. It was not a good situation. And then obviously people that you have chemistry with, but maybe your values don't line up, and you feel like you're going to lose them, or sometimes deep down you just know, like, this isn't the person for me. What am I even doing? Like, I'm having fun, but why am I with this person? It's just a waste of time. You're wasting their time. You're wasting your time. It's a waste of emotions and investment. So it's funny you say that, because as you're talking, I'm like, oh, yeah, she's like writing out my history right now. This is literally what has happened to me in my life, and probably a lot of people who are listening too. So you're obviously very pro-life. You talk about it a lot. I watched a lot of your pro-life videos, one with your brother and then ones that you've done on your own. And I've even seen like people do some rebuttals to yours. There's one, I'm not going to even say her name, but she was like trying to debunk one of your videos, and she's going through it, and she stops it 4 seconds in. She's like, let me just stop it right here. So hear the emotive music that she's playing. Like, she was so irritated that you had music in your video talking about pro-life stuff. But I want to talk about that a little bit because you're a new mother, and I want to know how motherhood has changed you. And I know that you have experienced a miscarriage that you've talked about a little bit. So shifting gears here a little bit, how has motherhood made you more or less pro-life, and how has that affected your beliefs?
Oh man, it has made me definitely more pro-life. After I had a miscarriage, so I had a miscarriage, and I had it at 12 weeks, which is not like super, super far along, but it is far along for a first trimester miscarriage. And I'd seen the heartbeat before it happened. So I thought we were out of the woods when I found out. And that miscarriage made me go from, okay, I know I want children, to I want all of the children I can possibly have, is really my feeling. Is just, I went from, I saw this baby, my child, growing, and then I lost him. And I am now so aware of what a life looks like from day one. From day one, it drives me crazy that the left can say that, oh, if you have a miscarriage, then it's your child. But, oh, if you have an abortion, then it's just a bundle of cells. I mean, come on. Like, you don't get to choose your baby's life status. Your baby's life status is life from conception. That's it. There's no question about it. Just because you wanted it or you didn't doesn't define whether that life has worth. I wanted my child, obviously. And even more than that, I knew that child was mine. So that miscarriage really, I would say, changed the trajectory of my life, I would guess, because before that I was like, oh, I'll probably have 3 kids and we'll have them this year and that year. And now I'm like, whatever God gives me, let's do it. Like, I just want to have as many kids as possible. And then having my son, I mean, we saw him grow in those ultrasounds from week to week. I mean, it was insane. Of course, this baby is a viable human being. I mean, the question of viability is so silly, because it's like, based on where you live and what access to medical care you have, a baby's going to be viable outside of the womb at 24 weeks or not at all, even at term. If you are living in Africa in a terrible, dirty area, and you have a baby at term, there's a chance that baby won't survive. But if you have a baby in an incredible hospital in New York City with amazing NICU care at 24 weeks, there's a good chance that baby's going to survive. Like, so what are we talking about with viability? I mean, being a mom has only made me more pro-life, not just from the perspective of all of the things we know about pregnancy and embryonic growth and all of that, but also from the perspective of, there is nothing that has made me feel better in my life, made me feel stronger, made me feel like a good person, nothing, than being a mom. And I hate that we tell women that they can't do it. It is truly shocking to me that a movement that tells women how strong they are, the feminist movement tells women how strong they are, also is undermining women at every turn by telling them that they are not strong enough to have a child. And it's like, no, every woman is strong enough to have a child. You were born to be this child's mother. Now, whether or not you decide to move forward with that's not, it shouldn't be a question, but it is. But you were born to be that child's mother. And that is such a powerful thing when you realize, and there's a reason that when women see and hear their child's heartbeats on ultrasounds, they realize they can't go through with it. They can't go through with an abortion because they know it's a life and they know it's their baby.
Right. You bring up a good point when you say that it's a baby when it's wanted and it's not a baby if it's not wanted. What do you say to the people? Because I feel like when it comes to this issue and it comes to this debate, and what people say, oh, it's not a baby. But as somebody who has experienced a miscarriage, that almost completely undermines any woman who's ever had a miscarriage and says you're mourning nothing. What do you say to them?
I honestly, I'm just kind of like, I can't believe you would even think that.
Yeah.
Because it's mind boggling because literally, I remember watching, there's a show called Dead to Me on Netflix that was kind of popular. And on that show, one of the characters has had multiple miscarriages, and her friend says to her, don't tell the right wing, whatever, conservatives, Republicans, I don't remember what she described them as, but don't tell them that I said this, but those were your babies. And I was like, that is exactly what they think. That is exactly what they think. It's like, oh, this baby is a baby because you wanted it. But if you didn't want it, it wouldn't matter. So yeah, it does undermine any woman that's had a miscarriage. It makes any woman who's had a miscarriage question her feelings about it. Here's what I'll say is that women who are pro-life, they know that this was a child. They know that they have an absolute reason to mourn. But a woman who is on the left and who has sucked up all of this information that, oh no, it's nothing, it's not a life until I say it is, whatever else, how confused must they be when they do mourn that child?
Yeah.
They must be so lost. Like, what is wrong with me that I care this much about something that didn't matter?
That's powerful.
Because it did, because it should, because it's your child and it's horrible to experience. So of course you feel bad. Of course that mothering, nurturing nature wants to take care of your baby and knows that it's a baby from the moment you conceived it. And it makes me so sad that these women have to struggle with understanding their own feelings, right? Because then you also have the women who not have a miscarriage, but have abortions and feel the same way. And they're like, why do I feel this? Why do I feel this sense of loss? Because it was a loss. Now, I'm not holding it against those women who have been taken in by a narrative that they've been sold their whole lives. I just feel for them that that was the decision that they made, not knowing what is so clearly true.
Yeah. That's such a powerful way to put it, because I feel like they do feel some sort of conflict of interest there of, I am grieving, but I also feel like this is a woman's choice, or it's not really a human being, but why do I feel this way? Why do I feel this regret? Whether it's, if it is an abortion that person chose. I'm curious what you think, Roe has been overturned. Like, this is a huge, amazing feat, but obviously it's not the end of the pro-life movement. And I'm asking you this question. Sometimes I softball some questions if people are pro-life, but maybe they're not really educated on the movement as a whole, but I do love to hear everybody speaking out about it. But you have been involved in the movement. You have been an advocate for a long time. Where do you think we go next? And where do you think that the pro-life movement can do better as a whole now that Roe is gone and the fight kind of changes to state-based? What should we be doing?
Well, I always laugh because I tweeted this after Roe was overturned. People who are uneducated on this topic think that it means that abortion was banned. They don't understand that it's now returned to the states. So I said something on Twitter like, just so you know, like, it's a state issue now. So you can go wherever you want. And there are different states that will say it's fine. And then I kind of put in parentheses, but we're hoping to overturn that too. Like that. Right. Exactly. And I think that's where the pro-life movement needs to go, right? Is now we have to convince people in those states that are so leftist, that are so like pro-abortion, pro-killing babies, that this is wrong. I mean, the truth is that we shouldn't have any legal abortion in America. It's awful that it exists, and especially in places like California and New York, where I don't actually know what the law is in Virginia, but it's always confusing over there, given what Governor Northam said a few years ago. Yeah. But that's, I think, the fight is to work in the state, on the state level. Where I think we can be better is that this honestly is the easiest argument to make. Being pro-life is like the best position for the conservative movement, for the right. Like, there's not any other argument that is this easy, that is this emotionally driven in a positive way. I mean, the left always is talking about how they are the side of emotion and we're the side of reason. I think that we hear that a lot. And I mean, to be fair, conservatism is very logical in a good way, but it's easy to make emotional arguments. And so the left wins on that in a lot of fronts. Yeah. This is the place where we get to win on the emotional argument. You want to kill babies? You want to murder infants? Like, what is wrong with you? It is so easy to, and the arguments, really, I always recommend watching, Steven Crowder's Change My Mind videos on abortion, because he really sits down with people and walks them through very respectfully. Here's where your arguments don't make sense. And as these people are getting closer and closer to understanding why they shouldn't believe this, you can see them just pushing back totally illogically and not being able to come up with why they believe what they believe. And I think they probably walk away from that going, okay, I need to reevaluate. Yeah. So as we educate ourselves, and that's really where it all starts, as we educate ourselves, as we understand exactly how development works, as we understand exactly why it doesn't make sense, like I mentioned before, that a baby born at 40 weeks in one, or at 24 weeks in one place is viable and at 24 weeks in another place isn't, then we can make these arguments in a really well-informed way, but also we have the emotional side. Like we are winning on the emotional side.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point you bring up, especially with Steven Crowder. And I won't even touch on the Steven Crowder Daily Wire drama that's going on.
I know. I was laughing as I brought it up, but I still believe those videos are really important to watch and really helpful.
Right. But yeah, I feel like a lot of people say, what should we do? What should we do? And I think the education piece is so incredibly important, because I do feel like a lot of women today are misled on what abortion actually is. They don't even know what it is or they're advocating for. I mean, it is an emotional thing that they're talking about, and they use a lot of emotional terms, or they use a lot of euphemism that sound really good and you feel like you're helping women, but it doesn't actually do anything beyond that. And they don't know what they're talking about. They can't tell you what an abortion is. They don't know how they're performed. They don't know the gestational age of the baby. I genuinely have people who think a 20-week baby is still a clump of cells, doesn't have arms, legs, eyes, anything. And I'm like, there's been 21-week babies who have survived that were born prematurely. I mean, it's alarming. And I had someone on who was a comprehensive sex ed teacher, and she talks about what they're teaching in class. And she's pro-life now and a Christian, and kind of speaks out about what she did for 10 years and was trained by Planned Parenthood, in saying that they encourage these kids to have sex. They don't even tell them what the baby is. And then they say, here's what safe sex is. Now do this. And then if you get pregnant, you go have an abortion. Like, they don't even give them their options of parenting. They don't do any of that. And then we have this whole culture in society today that's been raised up in these schools that pushes comprehensive sex ed, and they don't know what they're talking about. So I think the educational piece is huge. But we even struggle with that in some of these states, like you talk about. I'm in Colorado, and we tried to put in do a little bit of legislation where kids in comprehensive sex ed would have to see an ultrasound, and that was voted down. And that's it, just science. It's not even a woman who comes in and has to do the ultrasound in front of them, just a video. Here's what the baby looks like at 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever. And they voted down because they know that the educational piece will make people see the humanity of that baby or see the value of that baby. And oftentimes they will reject abortion, or they'll choose life, or they won't vote for that anymore. And I think that's part of the issue and where we need to be focusing. I mean, there's a lot of places we need to be focusing, but definitely the educational piece, because I think so many people don't even know what it is anymore. I
totally agree. And I've got two thoughts on what you were saying. One is learning now I have three thoughts. Okay, let's go. One of the things I think is absolutely so helpful is, and I know this sounds crazy, but if you download the Pregnancy Plus app, I know you're not pregnant, young women, but listen to me and download this app. It will show you a 3D model of the baby at every week of gestation. I have used that app a number of times to show people, this is how developed a baby is at 6 weeks. Yeah. This is how developed a baby is at 8 weeks. This is how developed a baby is at 12 weeks. And it has changed people's minds, because they didn't know that a baby has arms and legs by 10 weeks, by 9 weeks, even really it has arm buds by 6 weeks, 8 weeks.
Yeah.
They don't know that. And seeing it in a 3D model is so incredible. So download that app. That's number one. Number two, understanding, and this is really hard to do, okay, because it's emotional, but understanding what termination looks like, understanding what abortion looks like, because it is gruesome from first trimester. I mean, people think that the first trimester, oh, it's a pill and you bleed. No, you are starving the baby. You are starving the child. You are removing its food source so that it dies and it can't grow anymore. Like, once you realize what you're doing, you can explain that to people, and people will be horrified. I mean, second trimester and third trimester abortions are even more gruesome, but like even the first trimester is that intense. The last thing I want to say, which is sort of off the subject of education, but on the subject of what you were talking about of what they teach children in schools, is one of the really interesting things that, I'm a big proponent of is not moving away from your family, not moving away from your community if you can help it. And the reason I'm saying this is because how much harder is it to have an unplanned pregnancy if you are not near a support system? These are the people, these young people, we are encouraging to have sex, as you said, have unprotected sex maybe, or protected sex, but have sex, move away from family, pursue a career. And then if they have an unplanned pregnancy, guess who they don't have around to help? Guess how they're going to have to take this on alone. And how much more frightening is that?
Yeah.
Then, you know what? Maybe you'll have sex before marriage. We don't encourage it, but maybe you will. But you'll be home. You'll be in around the people who you love and who care about you. Maybe it's a faith community, maybe not your family, but it's people who you can trust. And if that happens, okay, then probably an abortion isn't the right choice because you'll have people around you who can help.
Yeah.
Why do we encourage? I mean, there's so many reasons why I'm against this, like everybody leave and go away from home and separate yourselves from the people who matter. But that's just one of them. Is like, of course, women are going to be in more of a position to want to get an abortion if they're completely alone and removed from anybody who wants to help take care of that child. It's just a mistake.
Yeah. That's a great point. I just got a book recently, and I'm going to botch the title. I don't even remember. I saw somebody reading it and I was like, oh, I want to read that. And I did like an add to cart with Amazon, but it's talking about, conservatives push nuclear family. And I think obviously the nuclear family is incredible, but this is talking about how generational families is more important, even the nuclear family. So you have grandma and grandpa, and you have the aunts and uncles, and you have this big community around you. And it's not just mom, dad, and kids, and you're off by yourself and have nobody around you that's your family. So community is so important, and even more so than, family is so important. And I know not everybody has an amazing family, and so not everybody can have it that way, but you can have community with people in your church, or, whether it's school that you find them in college, or, whatever it is that you're doing, work people that, you really connect with. You can find community in different ways. But I'm very interested to read this book because it's talking about generational families and how important our communities are. Abby, I end every single episode with asking our guest, if you could give one piece of advice to the people who are listening, because oftentimes talking about our beliefs in today's world is a little bit tough. If you could give them one piece of advice to speak out about their beliefs and be bold, what would that one piece of advice be?
My piece of advice is, if you start, you're going to give other people the confidence to follow. All of this speaking out in a situation where you are kind of fighting against the greater narrative is really scary, but it only can be done when we know that other people are doing it.
Yeah.
So if you feel like, hey, maybe I'm the first person to speak out about it, but I know I have friends who agree with me, but they're just not really talking out about it out loud, you can be the first, and it'll encourage others to do so. And it's really important to realize that all of this isn't done in a vacuum. It's not you alone. You are part of something bigger than yourself. You're part of a greater movement. You're part of a God. I mean, God is supporting you. And so if you are speaking out about something that you know is truth, and that is something I always say, is that no one can make you feel bad about yourself if what you know you're talking about is the capital T, the truth. There is no your truth. There is no her truth. It is the truth. And that's why I always say that People ask me, how do I get over the comments? How do I get over how mean the comments are? And I say, because they're wrong. Like, it's not, if somebody is telling me that my hair is ugly because it's blue, I can look at them and say, well, my hair isn't blue, so I know it's not ugly. If somebody tells you you're wrong because you believe that child has a heartbeat, you can say, I know at 21 days this baby has a heartbeat, right? So if you know that you are speaking the truth, then you don't have anything to be afraid of. And you are building up and shoring up a community and a movement that needs more people to speak out. I mean, we speak out for those who can't. Babies can't speak for themselves. Unborn children can't speak for themselves. And that we are so lucky to be able to do it for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking out can be a domino effect, and you don't have to be a YouTube creator or a podcaster or have a bunch of followers in order to do it. You don't have to, everyone, there's this word influencer that everybody uses for people on social media who have a decent following, but everyone's an influencer. I mean, if you influence just one person, that person can go influence another person or influence two people, and then it just continues to go. So speaking out can have this domino effect that can really impact the world just from it continuing on and continuing on. Well, here's real life motherhood, because my little one just walked in the room. There's a yucky thing. Okay. Okay, I'll be right there. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us. This is real life, guys. It's been a pleasure. I love everything that you guys are doing. Can you tell everybody where to find you on social media so they can go follow you?
Yes, absolutely. So I just started the Classically Abby podcast. You can listen to it anywhere you listen to podcasts. And you can follow me on all social media. It's at Classically Abby, absolutely everywhere. You can also follow me on YouTube. It's at Classically Abby there too.
Yes, guys, please go follow her. I've been following her, not for a long time, but you're one of my favorite follows now that I do follow you. I enjoy seeing your stuff. I enjoy what you talk about. You're very bold in everything that you share, and I love it. I'm taking a lot away from it. I'm reevaluating my life just from listening to the stuff that you're saying. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.